record button and let's get started. Hi! Look at there, recording. That was quick. All right, so this is lesson 10. I want to point out to you happy-go-lucky folks that we've only got, I think, 2 more. You're coming close to the end. How cool is that? You'll get your Friday mornings back. But today is sort of Leadership and Self-Deception Part 2. So I want to talk to you. I'm going to do the lecture first, and then we're going to talk about how this aligns to the book we were reading, and then it's all about any questions you guys have. So the lecture is actually Leadership is Influence. Probably a better way to say it is how to be an influencer, but it's pretty much the same thing. So there's an old, well, not that old, but there's a thing that's basically a supervisor tells someone what to do. A manager asks someone to make a change. A leader invests the time to teach others how to make a change. And an influencer leads by example, and others change their behavior. Run that through your head for a minute. Basically, it's a tier step of what makes somebody really good at running an organization. I personally always look at it in 3 steps, right? So here's Wayne 3 steps of how to run something. When you first start, all you're doing is telling people what to do at some point. But when you first start, the rule is don't tell, ask. Treat people like people, right? I mean, how many times have we had that conversation? Number 2 is don't ask, show. You with me? All right. Where you make the next leap, where you talk about influence, is don't, show, embody. This is a Wayne White special. There's not a book on this. This is just kind of what I think. And I base it off the fact that I knew some people and I've known some issues where the embodiment or lack thereof to the stated goals of the culture have radically changed my view of those bosses, the cultures, and my job. So let's kind of talk through that. When I was born many years ago, I was born in kind of a crappy part of Houston, Texas. That is an understatement, I assure you. I'm not the first person in my family to go through college. I'm the first person in my family to graduate high school. And college, but that's not the point. It was a pretty rough place. Some people call it the 5th Ward. But what you're really talking about is an area where you had multiple constituencies. You had a large African American community, a large Latino community, a slightly smaller Caucasian community, and a pretty large Asian community. And they all met in this one little area. And it was an interesting place to live, and I actually, frankly, enjoyed my childhood. So this isn't a tale of woe. I had some of the coolest friends anyone ever knows. But it was a high-crime area. There was a guy on like 2 blocks away. It was called the Soup Maker. It was this old dude. Whenever anybody was sick, he brought him soup. Now, I want you to hear this, because this is going to get kind of odd. I recognize I'm going left, but come with me for this ride. He made soup. I don't care who was sick. He knew everybody. I don't know how. He was a really old fella. And I guess, he knew everybody and their kids that took over the homes and their kids that took over the homes. But he would bring over soup. Dangest thing you've ever seen. Just the Campbell stuff, But he brought it over. For all the crime in the area, and there was quite a bit, nobody, and I mean nobody, ever touched, robbed the Soup Maker. God help anybody who tried. You're talking about a person that lived up to his ideals of kindness, and everybody respected that, even the sort of people that normally didn't respect anything. Likewise, my dad worked as a mechanic. There was a guy with muscular dystrophy. He was almost an uncle to me, who went from business to business to business, picking up bottles and empties and old tires and taking them for recycling. His hands shook so bad he couldn't write. He could barely drink coffee. He would sit with my dad and drink coffee, and his hands would shake so bad I was always in fear that he was going to really burn himself. It was difficult just to watch. But he lived his life in a way that I aspire to, frankly. Very accepting, very strong, very deep thought. He was protected by a group of Hell's Angels and the Sons of Silence that would basically beat your head in with a baseball bat if you did anything inappropriate to him. I mean, he was protected because everybody loved him because he was sincere in everything he did. You see this in early childhood, and you can probably, if you think about it, maybe it isn't someone with muscular dystrophy, but you can probably think about somebody from your childhood that everybody loved and everybody respected. And the one thing they all have in common, from an old man who makes soup to a teacher you had in junior high school, on and on and on, is they were completely sincere in everything they did. Now, if you try to put this into business, you start talking about influencers. If you had a boss that you worked for, that you just hated the thought of letting them down. I mean, you put in the extra hours, you did whatever you had to do because you just couldn't let them down. You were reacting to their sincerity. There's something about people who are extraordinarily sincere that reaches you. It reaches you subtly. It reaches you consciously and subconsciously, but it makes you want to emulate them. It's people who are inspirational in all walks of life. It can be as small as something as making a cup of soup to an elementary teacher who cared so much that they stayed late every single day, to that first boss you had when you first started working, that when you screwed up, patted you on the shoulder and said, everybody has a first day. It's okay. I mean, this kind of sincerity you react to. Likewise, the corollary, and it's not an insignificant corollary, is there are very few things that will cause you more disdain than a perceived hypocrite. I mean, this is endemic to the human condition. You automatically reject those people. Frankly, you hate them. Think about the boss you had when you were very young. God willing, it hasn't happened to you lately in your career. Think about when you were very young, the one that insisted everyone work late and then left every day at noon. The one that had everybody else up doing their inventory that they were supposed to do, but were gone. The one that wants you to save money in everything you do, but was always on frivolous trips. I worked for a boss a long time ago who used to talk about morals, 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 and how you should always do the right thing for the company. And I know for a fact he was doing some pretty shady things on his expense reports. Did I respect that person? God, no. I couldn't stand them. When he got nuked, and I was happy enough to be there when it happened, I didn't say it out loud because I didn't want to get in trouble, but in my head I went, yes, because you just can't stand hypocrites. If you are going to be said to be an influencer, the one thing you have to be is sincerely yourself. The changes you have to make in your life to make that something worth being, that's complicated and probably involves that book more than a little bit. But sincerity is everything, and hypocrisy is death. So I guess the question is, why don't more people, act the way they should? I don't know. Not everybody's going to see it. Not everybody's going to get it. It's just not going to happen. Maybe it's because of an internal versus external focus. I mean, this iPhone and all the little apps it's got all tell me how cool I am. All roads lead to Narcissus. If you're focusing only on yourself and you're not focusing on others, it's hard to be someone worth emulating. Because then all you are is that selfish son of a gun, looking at yourself instead of the team, being trapped in the box, as it were. So what do you need to do in order to be somebody that can influence others in a positive manner, and who can lead as an influencer? It's not overly complicated. One is, I always talk about clarity. If I was to give a name for this entire lecture series, I would probably call it Clarity. If I ever write a book, it'll be called Clarity. Not looking through blinders, being out of the box, right? But what do you have to do? Let's assume you have some level of clarity about yourself. Let's take it as a given, that you're a good human being and you want the right things for your team, right? So let's start with this, because if you don't have that, not a lot of good any of this is going to do you. Let's start with this. Probably two things you need to do. The first, and I'm going to say the word 3 times because it's a big deal to me. Teach, teach, teach. Teaching is everything. Sharing is everything. If you're walking in telling people what to do and how to do it, you're never going to be a great leader. You're never going to succeed. You're never going to improve. Teach. The greatest thing you can do is make somebody awesome. Help them on their journey to being better. The long-term positive. But you need to teach your team social values. And I'm not talking about, right or wrong of one political issue or the other. I'm talking about the values of being social, the values of teamwork as a long-term positive, and frankly that we need to teach empathy. That's a hard concept, teaching empathy, but it's true. Especially, and I'm sorry, I usually get really annoyed when people pick on millennials, but I would say in this last generation, we've done them so wrong, it's absolutely painful. It's ridiculous what we've done. We've set them up as a star of their own show. We've given them participation awards. We didn't teach them to work well with others. We taught them to complain well with others. You've got to teach these folks empathy for other people. It was just as bad in some of the other generations, by the way, as maybe the percentages are slightly different. Nobody's perfect, but I feel like we've specifically done them a disservice, and we owe it to them to do better. You've got to teach your team to see other people as people. That sounds pretty straightforward, but it's not. I mean, everybody has their own needs and desires. I always talk about it in terms of the car ride, because I teach this a lot. I talk about it in terms of car rides and aggressive drivers. I tell my kids, I tell everybody who asks, someone cuts you off. Maybe it's the old EMT in me. I used to be an emergency medical technician when I was young. I don't know what's happening in their life. Are they on the way to the hospital? Do they just have to fight with their father? Did their mother just die? Is their daughter sick? Has their wife left them? Did they leave their husband? Has a child just gotten arrested? Who knows? There are so many micro dramas happening all around you that it's mind blowing. I mean, every single person is the star of their own drama, I assure you. And these things are happening in real time all around you. If you knew that person had a sick child, if you knew that person's daughter was just hit by a drunk driver, would you be mad they passed you like that? No. It's human nature. You'd write it off as, I understand. But by seeing them just as cars and just as people getting in your way from getting to work on time, you're forgetting that they're people. And yes, this does absolutely go back to the book, Leadership and Self-Deception. You've got to keep in mind that human stories are occurring all around you. Someone's in a bad mood at work. Why? Do they have the flu? Does their husband, wife, or daughter, son have the flu? Is there some issue with a significant other, a catastrophic illness? We've had several lately in our family here at work. Oh my God, or maybe again, they just had the flu. All sorts of issues. You can't assume anything, and you can't take these things personal. You've got to remember, human stories are all around you. And if you ever see them as less than human, you're having a problem. So teach people on your team that human stories are everywhere, that we've got to have empathy. We've got to have understanding of others. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have difficult conversations. Let me share with you a very difficult conversation I had as a boss. If somebody's having some of these personal issues, if somebody's, a significant other, whatever the case may be, if things are just going really, really bad, what do? Their work is stuffered, they're falling down. I've heard people give what I've referred to, pardon my language, as the get your head out of your ass conversation. And they really just, pound on them and you better straighten up. There's a better way to do it. All right. I had a situation where a very dear colleague, someone I hired in spite of what everyone told me, but I could see the genius in this young man. Just incredible. So much attitude, it was ridiculous, but I saw it. And I'm glad I did, right? He was going through a divorce with his wife. It was a horrible custody battle. He was being told that he was never going to see his kid again if she could make it happen unless he basically gave her the house. I mean, it was all these horrible things. I would hear him talking to his friends and occasionally to me, not so much to me, but I heard it and I knew it was going on. and his work just fell apart. One of the greatest developers I've ever worked with in my life. He is the equivalent of a C-level today at a major corporation in Australia. Very proud of the young man. But he'd fallen apart. I had multiple people I knew well and respected, tell me I needed to fire him or give him the get your head out of your ass conversation. But you've got to remember, there's a human story going on. There's something real. You've got to have that genuine sense of empathy. So what I did is I pulled him aside. And I did have the conversation. I just flavored it a little bit differently. I just changed it a touch. I said, insert name here. We're going to say Eddie just so I can have a name I can say. I assure you it was no one named Edward. But, Eddie, I get it. You know, you're dropping the ball here. This is a problem. That's a problem because your head is somewhere else. I understand that. I genuinely do. What you're going through, I wouldn't wish on anyone. I certainly wouldn't wish it on myself, but you have to understand how you're hurting yourself now. You've got to understand how you're making it worse. How much worse is everything that you're going through going to be if you start having trouble at work? How much worse is it going to be if HR comes in here because of the number of days you've missed and puts you on a performance improvement plan? How much worse is it going to be? Everything you're going through, if you're unemployed on top of it, you need to understand that by living and breathing this, you're taking your eye off the ball and it's hurting you. You either need to take some time off to deal with this issue or you need to work your way through it. But don't make it worse. I had that conversation with him. It was kind of interesting. He took a few days off. Came back, worked harder than anybody I've ever seen. Not because of me per se, just because he needed an outlet. He thanked me later for having that conversation with him, not just screaming at him, not just yelling, but trying to empathize with his situation. Like I said, he's gone on to do great things. And everybody that said I should have fired him, hey, I'm not saying you don't move somebody up or move somebody out. I'm not saying I wouldn't have made an uncomfortable decision if things hadn't gone that way. But by understanding the human story, by showing empathy, by trying to reach him as a human being, not a resource that wasn't pulling his weight, I was able to help him, I want to emphasize that, help him turn his outlook a little and improve his situation. He did it. I just kind of gave a gentle push instead of hitting with a hammer, if you follow what I'm saying. We've got to teach people. So when I have people that work for me, I try to teach them the long-term value of finding solutions together, the long-term value of working well with others and being empathetic, the long-term value is to, instead of getting what you want today, think long-term. No one gets up in the morning. I use this example all the time, and some of you have probably heard it. No one gets up in the morning and says to themselves, I'm going to do a bad job today. No one that I know of has ever done that. But people get upset when someone else is having a bad day and not working. No one woke up this morning and said, I'm going to go in and screw off and irritate Eddie. I'm going to go in and make Wayne angry. I'm going to go in and I'm going to upset Kevin to no end because I just don't care. That's not happening. There are real human stories going on. No one wakes up hating someone else unless something happens. You do get interpersonal bitterness sometimes because people are in the box, because they don't see people as people, because they're not showing empathy, because they are looking through blinders instead of clarity. So what do? You have to teach them to drain the swamp. No one make a Trump joke. I hate that that's become a term. A boss I worked with a long time ago saw I was having trouble with someone and said, Wayne, I think you need to drain the swamp. Call them up. Go to them. Visit. Spend time. Get to know them as a person. I had no idea what my boss was talking about. I loved him. Onye Izuku, just a great human being. I couldn't even understand. This guy was a complete jerk to me every single day, every interaction. Why would I go and do that? I had enough respect for Onye by watching him, how he lived his life, that I did it. I won't say me and this person became best friends. We didn't. But I got to understand him, and he got to understand me, and working together was less painful. I won't claim it got good. but it was less headache. It was less trouble. Just realizing that he had his own human story going on. They're going on all around you. Likewise, you've got to stop people when you see them using people as ways to get ahead. You know the person. I'm going to step on everybody I can on my way up as I climb the ladder and I kick you down. Those people exist. Sometimes you've got to remove them from your organization. They can certainly be pain. But the truth of the matter is some of them just don't know any better. All they were taught is get ahead by anything. Usually those people can be trained. All you have to do is talk about game theory. I'm a huge believer in game theory. There's something called the good guy conundrum that's out there that basically says if we all walk up and one person acts negative, he gets this many points, and if one person is positive, they get this many. But if everybody's positive, you make more money than you would if you were the sole jerk. You get more points. It's a really complicated game. If you ever get a chance to look it up, please do. It's a fascinating math problem. But the bottom line, what it really shows is if you're sincere, you're approachable, if you go into it with the expectation that this is going to be a positive encounter, and you can get everybody else to act that way as well, as a team, as an organization, you function at a higher level. So usually those folks I try to teach this game theory to. I try to explain it to. I try to train them up. I don't give up on them. They've had bad teachers. They've had bad examples. Usually you can bring them around. So if you want to be an influencer, teach. It has to be something you do every single day. And another thing I try to do, as far as the empathy thing, as far as teaching empathy, is you've got to teach others to never forget the human cost of any decision. Some of you have heard me talk about this before. You may not have realized that's what I was doing, but you've heard me talk about it before. The average employee costs a company approximately $80,000. That's not salary. Don't we all wish that was the average salary? But it's salary, benefit, taxes, training, etc. Every year, a person, benefits is 30% by itself. The average employee, though, runs around there at a high-tech firm. Less in some places, heck of a lot more in some places, but that's about where it winds up. I've heard 70,000. I'm going with 80 these days. So, you could also claim 100,000. If we didn't have agents here, it'd probably be closer. Again, remember, that's not just salary, that's taxes and insurance and all the rest of that jazz. So if you make a $160,000 mistake, guys, that's 2 jobs. If you make $1 million mistake, how many jobs just got lost? If I have to cut costs to make up for that, how many people are going to be hurt? Let's say that there's a screw up and it's gonna mean that I have to lay off 10 people. And I teach this, and I want you to put this in your head. If you made a mistake and it's going to cost 10 people their jobs, you have to think of it in human terms. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but statistics say for every 10 people who lose their job, roughly almost half of them will suffer what's considered a negative long-term life event. Negative long-term life events include such things as losing your house, losing your car, divorce, kid pulled out of college. I'm not talking insignificant things. I'm talking very serious negative long-term life events. So if I've made a mistake that costs 10 people their job and 5 of them are going to have a negative long-term life event, now they have to get out of the house. They're going into bankruptcy. They wind up in a small apartment. This guy's kid drops out of here. This person's husband leaves them. It's a maelstrom. So thinking of decisions in human terms and the possible potential outcomes is something you have to teach. It wasn't just a $160,000 mistake, Eddie. You just hurt 2 people. I either have to find a way to cut that amount of cost, or your most immediate operating expense cost always works around on 2 legs, people. You've got to think of it in human terms. I would say in general, that's not taught anymore. It used to be back in the day. A book next week or coming up, Andrew Carnegie talks about that, and that's a very old book. So teach. Teach people to see people as people. Not that hard. The second thing, very short, very simple, this won't take long. Be. The verb to be. If you want to influence people, Sincerity is everything. You have to be yourself. You can't fake it. I know you think you can. I'm sure somebody out there thinks they can. They're wildly wrong. Most people have an innate sense about several things. It's actually part of our survival instincts that we've never been able to go against. Dangerous behaviors and dangerous signs. Some people call that the goosebump effect. If you're standing next to somebody at a bus stop, and there's something about the way they're holding themselves, the way they're looking, the way they're talking, just kind of sets you off, and suddenly, like that, you're nervous. You have an innate sense of antisocial behavior, and it makes you want to go, I'm gonna scoot over here just a little bit. Something ain't right about that guy. It's innate. You can't move it. Likewise, to one degree or another, most people have an innate sense about people lying to them. Now, there's excellent liars, and there's certainly psychopathic behaviors that can short-circuit that sense, but you know. That's why they always talk about first impressions are so important. First impressions are made in the first few minutes. These are actually your survival instincts kicking in again. You get an innate sense of someone's trustworthiness or lack thereof within a few minutes of meeting them. You've had that time. I'm sure you have. Think it through. You ever met somebody and just instantly went, I don't know about that guy. You know, I used to use a routine many years ago. Before I'll hire somebody to work for me, I need to know I could trust them with my wallet on the table or my wife in the room. You know, your mileage or examples may differ. It's just a sense. Sometimes you're like, that guy's kind of a snake. Congratulations. You still have a really good grasp of your survival instincts. Here's the deal though. The more someone is exposed to inappropriate behavior, to lying, to hypocrisy, etc., the more they've been burnt, I think is the colloquial term, the more sensitive to it they are. And the more they'll assume that someone is completely full of crap. Frankly, how's that for a statement like it is? So what do? You have to be sure that if you want to be a leader, if you want to be an influencer, not just a boss, if you want to take that team up to the next level, you have to be sincere in all things. You can't fake it. You will be found out. People's innate senses are far more clever than you probably think, and they know. And if being yourself, this is why it's be, if being yourself isn't enough to be something worth emulating, well, you've just found something you need to work on. And what you need to work on in this case, you. How's that grab you? All right. So the rule is, if you're going to embody it, because you remember when I wrote it up there, don't show, embody. If you're going to embody it, you've got to be it. Okay? And if you're not where you need to be yet, go fix that. Go fix that before you try to fix other people. You'll never be perfect. I'm not perfect. Oh my God. No one ever will be. We'll always make mistakes. We'll always fall back. We'll always fall behind. The key term, frankly though, is sincerity, not perfection. Sincerity isn't perfection. Sincerity is just real. So make yourself the best you can and don't pretend to be anything you aren't. You'll have a lot more respect from people. Guaranteed. Right, wrong, or indifferent. Now, let's real quickly kind of run to the book for a minute, talk about a few things, and kind of put a period on that sentence and then see if you guys have any questions. So, in terms of the book, can you be an influencer, which is really the highest level of leadership? Can you be an influencer, a positive influence, a role model, little r, role model, if you prejudge others, which is what the book talks about, if you see others as threats, if you see others in terms of what they can do for you, what they can stop you from, if you see people as objects, if you're inside the box. I would say no. If you react to people as anything less than people, they can tell. Remember those instincts, subconsciously or not. And so they will automatically react to you as you're less than a person. And this is how. Congratulations, you just became that jerk at work. That jerk is not a person. It's a thing. Now you've put them in the box too. So let's go back to game theory for just 1 minute. I'm a big believer in this stuff, by the way. You've got two bosses and their teams competing, teams A and teams B. Assuming equal work and equal talent, which boss is going to outperform the other? If, let's say they both start with 10 people and 3 are bad actors and 7 kick keister. Well, boss A's got 7 positive interactions for each 3 negative. Boss B comes in a bad mood, irritable about something, and starts seeing people as just annoying him, stopping him from getting his job done. Half of his good actors are going to go into the box like that. So what do you got? 3 or 4 good? Or 6 or 7 bad? Teamwork states that the combined effort of a well-functioning team is better than any group of individuals. Team B is not even in the game anymore. You know, they're falling apart. Your being in your box, you being in your box, stops your team, your loved ones, your friends, and the people around you from having positive reactions to you, which convinces you you're right. You have to pull out completely. Always remember their people. So you can't be an influencer inside the box. You can't be an influential leader. You can't be a person that brings out the best in others because you're bringing out the worst in others. Train and be. Embody everything you want. And you can be really the boss you want to be. You'll always fall behind. You'll always make mistakes. This is why, you know, at least for me, I have on my PC, as I've told you before, a weekly reset where I stop and I go, where did I lose it? What did I do wrong? Pretty often I can give you examples every week, because we are just people. But try. Do everything you can to be it. Now, I want to take some time for questions if we have any on the book, comments, what you thought about, what you didn't think about. So leadership and self-deception. Does anybody got a question? Or a comment?
Yep, I do, Wayne. This is Brandon.
Okay. Yes, Brandon.
I found it absolutely fantastic, by the way. I love it.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that.
The last chapter, I agree with you, was a little culty. It was interesting. Kind of reminded me of Fight Club.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about if we're walking around and we see somebody that's in the box, the book states that we shouldn't look for people that are in the box. But I'm not sure I agree with that, because if I notice that somebody's in the box, then I'm thinking, how do I get them to think out of the box? If I know that they're in the box, I need to figure out why they are like that way. If it's me that's doing it, and then it may not be. It could be something that's built up for a long period of time.
Sure, human stories.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think strategically as a leader, we need to figure out how to rescue them from their own, issues.
So let me give you some feedback on that. First off, I think that was those are some strong insight. I do think obviously you read that book and paid serious attention. I want you to try to, if you can, change some of the terminology. You're not going to save someone from being in the box. You're not going to rescue them from being in the box, no more than Onye could rescue me. What you can do is influence. What you can do is hint. What you can do is a little comment here, a little comment there. People, and I think if you think through the book, people have to pull themselves out of the box. They have to realize they're in it. They have to realize that they're treating people as something less than people. They're treating them as objects. Once they come to that realization, they're actually stepping out of the box at that moment. If you go back through the examples, Ted and what he was teaching and, the 2 airplane seats and all the rest, once you recognize your perceptions are clouded, you've actually took 1 foot already out. You're already moving. So you're not going to save them because actually anything you say is just going to reinforce their perceptions. What you do is you hint, you help, you influence, you teach. Right? So when I was talking to Onye, what a wonderful man, by the way. I hope someday maybe you guys get a chance to speak to this fascinating individual. When I was talking about this terrible negative interaction, And I mean, I was so deep in the box that I probably had 5 foot of cardboard, man. It was ridiculous. All he said was drain the swamp. All he said was, go spend some time. Wayne, go spend some time with him. That's all I want you to do. Just go say hello, spend time with him. Go to his desk. Spend a little time. Do this for me. Try to drain the swamp. Just do that. Go spend time. That was a hint. That was a gentle nudge. It was a gentle push to go view that person, that thing, as real, as a human, you know. That's the kind of thing you do for your people. You know, if they're deep in the box, you may not be able to find the reason. You may not know it's you. Remember those human stories that are around us at all times. But if they're having a problem with Eddie, go talk to Eddie. Go spend some time with Eddie. You know, he's got some issues too, just like all of us. Go spend some time. You know, it has to be subtle, because for all that you're an awesome person, and I think you are, by the way, I think you're peaceful. None of us have the ability to pull somebody out of their misconception, to pull somebody out of this perception of other people as less than themselves. You can't fix it for them, for all that you might try. What you can do is be an influencer. What you can do is show that you're not in that box. What you can do is talk to them as a human being. Talk about the person they're having trouble with as a human being. Talk about everything you do in terms of the human animal and help them slowly move there. And if you do that, eventually, hopefully, they'll pull themselves out. So I completely agree with your idea. I completely agree with the direction. I just want to be sure you know you can't save them. You can just guide them along. And eventually, we hope, they'll pull themselves out of it. If they don't, they'll kind of wreck their own career in the end. I've seen it happen too many times to think it's a coincidence. I've seen too many people walk in and irritable about Eddie over there and John over there and Sheila over there and Karen over there. It's ridiculous. And they work themselves up so much they learn to hate their own job, and they hate coming in every day. They start getting ulcers, and inevitably they leave. And then they go to the next job and they have the same problem where they go there. These people are just completely unhappy, and they make themselves that way. So try. You can't save them, but try to help them. The truth is this, and I'll put a period with this one. You may not be able to, but the things you say to them, Brandon, the things you say today might resonate with them later. When they move, when they leave, when they go to the next job and they're still unhappy, they may have their awakening there, out of sight of you, out of sight of what you've said and what you've done. They may have their awakening there. So those little helps, those little pushes, the little wisdom you can share, may not help them with you, but 5 years later it may help them. So don't expect to always see success, but know sometimes the success happens after you leave. Does that make sense?
100%. Got it.
Okay. Any other comments? I'll take that as a no. Like last time, I got a lot one-on-one email. Fascinating phenomenon. If anybody has any that they would rather share one-on-one, please send me a note. I hope you guys enjoyed this book. The reason we put this closer to the end is because it involves you. It's easy to teach people how to deal with others. Hard to teach people how to deal with themselves, but I think it's the most important thing you can do. So let's talk about where we're going in the last 2 meetings we're going to have, right? Next week, which is technically the 11th lesson, 11.5, let's call it that. Going to be 10 C's for teamwork. I think there must be 2 or 3 dozen versions of this out there. This isn't something new. It may have my swing on it, but it's an old conversation. If you start looking up 10 C's, you'll see 10 C's, 8 C's, 6 C's, 5 C's. Most people have 10 because for some reason people like, double digits, I guess. I don't know why. But the concept of it have been around a long time. And an optional reading, How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you want to buy it, it's a great book. It really is. Dale Carnegie was legit. If you don't want to buy it, that's fine, because we're actually only going to focus on half of it, because half of that book is all about salesmanship. You guys aren't in sales positions, mostly. Although Corey, the other side of that wall, says everybody's a salesman. But the other half, specifically about how to win friends and influence people, it really is all about empathy. Empathy, politeness, and kindness, and it's a good book. We'll walk through a couple of the steps on it, and walk through how to foster an environment of teamwork. The week after that is about culture. That will be our last meeting. We'll have some fun things for that one. I think you'll enjoy that. But next week, lesson 11, 10 C's for teamwork, and your optional reading, how to win friends and influence people. And that does us for today. Oh, look, I can give you a couple of minutes back. How about that? Does anybody have any questions? Going once? Going twice? Going 3 times. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.